What's up, everybody? This is Alex Christoforou with the Duran, and I'm here with Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. And today we're going to be talking about Putin's black belt geopolitics. So, Peter, you're one of the foremost experts on Russia and geopolitics. You're a historian. You understand. I would like to say you understand Putin better than anybody. I would imagine you understand Russian geopolitics better than anybody on the planet today. And we were talking the other day about this article that talked about how Putin uses black belt judo maneuvers to get his geopolitical wins. A lot of people like to use that black belt analogy because Putin himself is a judo master. And so they say he uses his enemy's own weight against them, so on and so forth. Our viewers know where we're going with this.
No, that's probably the only thing they get right, too.
Yeah. Okay, so tell our viewers right now, what do you think of this this comparison to black belt and to how Putin operates in the geopolitical sphere?
Well, I think I don't know anything about judo except for I've seen it before, but in judo, you are, number one, patience. Number two, you size up the weaknesses, not the strengths, the weaknesses of your opponent. And then you strike, and you only strike once. And let me give you a real historical example. We had, after the illegal coup in Kiev in spring 2014, we have this political creature from the swamp, Poroshenko, comes to power. And then we started with the return of Crimea to Russia, and then the flare-up of Ukrainian forces attacking the Donbass. And then they had this Minsk format. And I can remember meeting in Minsk. You had we had Hollande, we had Merkel, we had Putin, we had Poroshenko. And so you have Merkel and Hollande. They're saying, we need to do this, structure this, when this happens, it just kind of like the Western mind. And Poroshenko's in the middle, okay? And he looks at Putin. Putin doesn't say anything. And that's what Poroshenko is terrified of, because Putin doesn't threaten. Putin doesn't promise. Putin acts. And see, when you see Poroshenko, he likes Hollande and Merkel because he understands Western parlance, and he can predict what they're going to do. He looks to the other side, and it's Vladimir Putin, and he knows that's the real challenge right there. And see, my point is that what happens as it's practiced by the United States and its allies, most of it's bluster, it's words, it's not really negotiating. It's basically trying to steamroll everyone around you if they disagree with you. You can't do that with Russia. And so Russia, with very limited resources, I can't overstress that, limited resources, and it takes limited risks. It's not a risk-taking country or culture, by the way. And so they look for an opportunity. Okay, I'll give Ukraine again. I have to say, I think the Russian foreign intelligence and diplomatic endeavors of the Russian government were asleep at the wheel when it came to Ukraine. They should have seen what was happening with these neo-fascist groups, the American involvement that was so deep. And so when the coup happened, Russia took a very sober view of what was going on in the country. It saw the people in the Donbass verbally and then very quickly physically attacked by the Kiev forces. Crimea, so they made a bid that Crimea is a geostrategic important element of Russian foreign policy to be able to project power in that part of the world. The people there do not want to be part of a regime that was overthrown. These are the people that voted for Yanukovych, by the way, and so did the Donbass. And so the Russians with very calculated, very soberly, and with meticulous strategy, was able to take this off as a contentious point very quickly. Of course, the West wasn't very happy about it. I mean, certainly Poroshenko wasn't happy about it. Okay, he got a rump state, but he lost Crimea, and that's something that's going to be a difficulty. Though if we saw after the Helsinki Summit, basically Crimea is off the table. It's really how to deal with eastern Ukraine and how to wrap up that simmering conflict. So it's not even on the table. It's not even to be negotiated. And if it was asked, if Putin had been asked about that, he would have said exactly that. Well, that issue has been settled. There's nothing to settle.
Right, right. So let's stay with the Helsinki Summit. After the Helsinki Summit, I know, as you're aware, and I was watching, a lot of the mainstream media was drudging up all of Putin's past geopolitical sins. And they started with Georgia, and they progressed to how Putin invaded Georgia, and then he invaded Ukraine, and then he meddled and invaded Syria, or he propped up the Assad rogue regime in Syria, as they like to push that narrative. I want you to take each of these geopolitical hotspots one by one, sure, and tell our viewers exactly what did Russia and Putin do in these geopolitical hotspots. How did Putin engage with Georgia, with Ukraine, and with Syria when the conflicts did start? Mm-hmm. I want you to debunk the very simplistic narrative that Putin just invaded these countries or meddled in these countries, because I think there really is a need to shed some light as to what happened historically, geopolitically. We need some real news on these three geopolitical areas.
Okay, let's take Georgia, and I'll try to condense it down and make it very clear. Right. When Georgia became an independent state after the fall of the Soviet Union, we had a leader come to power there named Gamsakhurdia, and he was a rabid Georgian nationalist. And he won on very much like the people in Kiev in 2014. Ethno-nationalism, linguistic nationalism. The problem is that Georgia is a mishmash, like so many other places in this part of the world. It had Ossetians, Abkhazians. These are not Georgians. They're different, and they identify differently. And, oh, by the way, there's a North Ossetia, at that time was in Russia, and South Ossetia that found itself in the sovereign borders of Georgia. Well, you had Saakashvili, that hothead, and obviously a tool of the United States and its Western allies, came to power through what's called the Rose Revolution. Georgia was intensely corrupt, and President Edward Shevardnadze didn't try to attempt to hold on to power, and the coup was successful. The Americans, another check on the blackboard. Okay, then Saakashvili made this great proclamation that he was going to bring all of Georgia under control, because he had in South Ossetia, you had as a result of this ethnic cleansing that some Saakashvili was pushing, a conflict brood came about, right, and in Abkhazia. And so basically we had international peacekeepers keeping the peace right there in South Ossetia. And in August 2008, just when the Olympics was opening up, interesting, huh? Georgian forces invaded. Now, people will say you can't invade your own territory. Well, I counter. Well, there were peacekeepers there, internationally recognized, and Russian citizens. Okay, people that had more than one passport. Oh, but Peter, that's their strategy of destabilizing all of the former Soviet Union. No, that's not true. It was agreed upon people could choose their passport when the Soviet Union came to an end. Okay, in that case, a lot of people chose Russian. but they were still living in their own homes. Georgia attacks it. The Russians, at that time it was President Medvedev, it was then Prime Minister Putin. They pushed them back, quite literally, and they pushed him way out of South Ossetia, created a perimeter. The NSA lost $1 billion in equipment. Cool. Wow. That was great. Okay. Poof, it's gone. Okay. That outpost took a long time to repair. And they could have taken Tbilisi in a weekend, but they didn't. Did they? They moved back to the frontier of South Ossetia, just as they agreed to. Sarkozy thought he was, the greatest peacemaker since Metternich. Okay, he made a complete buffoon out of himself. The Russians went right back to the border right there. Yes, they created fortifications, and then South Ossetia was recognized by Russia as a sovereign state. Okay, all right. So all of the myths there. Russia didn't attack Georgia. Georgia attacked South Ossetia. The Russians responded. And common sense, I mean, always you hear right to protect. R2P, right to protect. Well, I guess you could say that was right to protect too, because there was, by any definition, it was ethnic cleansing. Okay, they had to make sure that could never happen again. And what we have now, I'll finish up on Georgia. Is that a conflict resolved? In the eyes of the South Ossetians, it is. In the eyes of Russia, but you know what? Things can change. If Georgia became this stellar, a prosperous, free, democratic, tolerant place, maybe they'd like to join Georgia again. Okay, right. But it will be their decision. Okay, these people have agency. You know, the way I use the term agency, most pundits don't have a clue what I'm talking about. You know why? Because the West never sees anyone that does. No one has agency unless they say so.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Real quick, what happened to Saakashvili?
Well, he's out. He can't go back to his own country because he's wanted on corruption charges, abuse of power. But remarkably, he remained a tool of the United States. He ended up being governor in Ukraine.
There you go.
And then in Odessa, and then he had a falling out with Poroshenko and the criminal oligarchs that they have in Ukraine. They threw him out. Okay, he made it to Poland. He made it back in. He gets on top of a building and says he's going to jump off. I'm going to be nice. Okay, I shouldn't wish bad things, but you know, there could have been a different ending, and all this could have come to an end. But now he's back. I guess he's back in Poland. I've theorized that he's learning Spanish so the U.S. can fly him into Venezuela when they need him.
Right, and that's the perfect segue into Putin invaded Ukraine. Debunk that for us, Peter Lavelle.
Well, what happened was there was an illegal overthrow of the legal government internationally recognized by the United States and by the EU. And there were protests on what's called the Maidan, the major square in Kiev. They went on for weeks and weeks, months. It was kind of a redo of what's called the Orange Revolution. There were people there on that square, which I've been many times. It's very beautiful then. They had grievances and rightful ones. Okay, the level of Ukraine is a really, really corrupt place. Okay, really corrupt. Unfortunately, because of outside interference, material and money, these right-wing militias, neo-Nazi, ultra-nationalist organizations took the reins of the what would become a coup, and there's ample evidence. There was at the night that the Yanukovych government fell. There was the sniper attack, and there's ample evidence that it was intended to create as much chaos as possible. Everybody pointed at, these are Russian agents protecting Yanukovych. I really want to make it clear to people that Yanukovych is not a pro-Russia president. Okay, let's go to the European Association Agreement. This was a step for Ukraine to enter the European Union, and Yanukovych had to agree to a lot of things, and the Russians at the last second said, well, we'll give you a loan, $15 billion to get you through your troubles right now. And so Yanukovych is going back and forth. But if he was a pro-Russian president, how in the world would he be negotiating with the Europeans at the same time and keep his job, as it were? So take away the pro-Russian president. He wasn't. He was in negotiations with the Europeans. And then the crux came. There was a real crisis, and the European Union, Russia was an observer, but it didn't sign anything, that the Ukrainians and the European Union, that there would be a change of power, new elections. It was getting out of the crisis. Well, the day after they signed the agreement, the coup happens. The European Union did not step in and condemn the illegal overthrow of an elected government. Okay, they were spineless. They did not keep their word. And ever since then, I've been horrifically critical of the EU's foreign policy because of that there. Then what happens is, then you have a group of events that really unfold. As I said earlier in our chat here, these ultranationalists came to power. The people in the East They saw this as a mortal threat, a real threat. They knew these groups existed in Western Ukraine. I mean, the people wearing swastikas and Waffen SS stuff, and in contact with American Nazis and Canadian Nazis, international network. They knew who these people were. And so what happened is that the Crimeans said, we're out of here. We're out of here. Okay, we never wanted to be part of the Ukraine in the first place. Okay, it's ethnically Russian, it's Tatar, and a small Ukrainian population. Let me point out, I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, but when when there was a standoff between the Ukrainian Navy and the Russian Navy, because they're sharing this port here. Do you know what? The vast majority of the Ukrainian sailors, they got an offer, join the Russian Navy, and they did. They did. They changed uniforms. They said, fine, you're worth us now.
Right.
Okay. How many people died in the invasion of Crimea? Zero. Yeah. I think it was one self-inflicted wound, something like that. But there was no death in anger. Okay. And so when this was all happening, there was an illegal government in Kiev, and so under the treaty that the Russians and the Ukrainians had, is that the Russians would have to call Kiev and say, we're doing this on the peninsula, we're moving these troops, we're moving this boat and all that, part of the treaty. Well, there was no legal government in Ukraine. And so they said, okay, no one's there to answer the phone. Crimea is the least of our problems here, okay? It's becoming very, very prosperous. They got the new bridge. It's the Donbass. Mm-hmm. They are predominantly ethnically Russian. They're pro-Russian. When you think of the Donbass and Russia, up until this time, it was a completely open border. I mean, you could be living in the very eastern part of Ukraine, say, I'm going to go to work, hon, and you cross over the border into Russia, and then you come home for dinner back in Ukraine, okay? And the trade was very fluid in all of that. There wasn't, in their minds, there was no border. Then you have what was called the anti-terrorist operation, where up to 12,000 people have died. The vast, vast majority of them are civilians. Now, Russia invaded the Donbass. There was no invasion. One trick I've played on my program many times, when people say, when Putin invaded Ukraine, I say, just stop there, okay? When was that? Can you give me the date? Okay, give me the month. Give me the season. No, you don't know, because there wasn't any. Did Russian irregulars go to the Donbass? Yeah. I'm sure someone said, hey, Sarge, can you give me a month off? I got to go take care of Granny. Yeah, right. Go ahead. Okay, it's fine. You got furloughed. Do whatever you want to do. Has the Russian side given material support to the people fighting for their agency and life? Yeah, they have. Okay. Yeah, Russia will not allow the Donbass to be ethnically cleansed. Let people in the West understand this, all right? Because it's so simple. For Brussels, for Washington, for London, this is all geopolitics. Where I live right now, that's family. That's where relatives live, and they're being killed for no other reason than their ethnicity or their religion. Or how they see history. Winning the Second World War over Nazism was a good thing. Not everybody in Kiev thinks that, okay, with their Nazi marches and their torches. The Western media doesn't like to show
something that's never reported in Western media. And most pundits, you have a lot of pundits who are Jewish or and they're pro Kiev, pro this neo-Nazi, these neo-Nazi groups.
You have to say, the Atlantic Council, the media arm of NATO, even they've come out in the last few weeks saying that this is getting serious here. Of course, they were part of bringing it about in the first place. So we have this Minsk process. The Kiev government won't fulfill any of the demands because they know that the Americans won't push them. Okay. Maybe Trump will change his mind on that. They did send over $200 million more of military aid. I don't know if there was anything Trump could do about it to that point. I don't think Ukraine's that important to him, but we'll see here. But did Russia Okay, I always tell people, I mean, if you hadn't overthrown the government in Kiev, Crimea still would be part of Ukraine. Okay, so you have no foresight in the WikiLeaks cables. The first major big batch, they had the diplomatic cables in 2008. Then and now, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was talking to an American ambassador about Ukraine. He said, Ukraine is very, very fragile. Very fragile. You mess with it too much and it will break up. The Russians know Ukraine really well. Okay? So, what is the result? They've cut much of the trade ties between Ukraine and Russia, their most important market. The European Union, because of the collapse of the Soviet Union, a great deal of Ukrainian economy has been deindustrialized with some very important military plants that nobody in NATO wants. Russia has replaced them themselves inside of Russia with more modernized, less corrupt companies. I mean, Ukraine is, how many feet can you shoot? Boom, boom, boom. Okay? And so that's where we stand right now. Russia doesn't want to see this happen at all. But policymakers in London and Washington, it's all geopolitics to them. It has nothing to do about the fate of people. And we'll end on this part for Ukraine. We always talk about, these immigration waves going into Europe. Over 1.2 million people from the Donbass have come to Russia. Nobody tells you that. How many times in history has the aggressor country seen the people they're aggressing want to come and live in their country? Right. One historical example of that. They all lived through Russia. They've been integrated. They've been welcomed.
Right.
All right. Okay. They were forced to leave their homes, okay, because of the machinations of some neocons that, Ukraine is the prize. Well, maybe it is in their mind, but look at the suffering that they have caused, and they have no inkling to end it anytime soon.
Right. It's truly a tragedy. And that brings us to Syria. And before 2015, I believe that ISIS was about 12 kilometers away from Damascus. After 2015, when Russia got involved, the tide of the war changed drastically to today, where it looks like Assad has won the war, and it looks like he is mopping up wherever ISIS is in the south and in the east. Explain to us what was Putin's strategy in Syria, because it was a very limited, very risk-averse strategy that he pulled off in Syria, and it worked. Explain to us and debunk the myth that Putin somehow supported and propped up this rogue dictator, that Russia occupied Syria, so on and so forth.
Well, all the tragedy that started with in Syria started in 2011, and on the same day that the quote-unquote uprising against Assad happened, you had people yelling slogans, and going after killing police officers and people, state officials. This is well planned, and there's plenty of evidence if you want to look at it. They've been planning this since 2006, 2008. Okay, they wanted to get rid of the Assad family. And then the U.S. clandestinely and not so clandestinely, with its Gulf allies, we have Saudi Arabia primarily, exporting jihad. Okay, and Syria is a multi-confessional country. It's a really beautiful, wonderful place. You have Shia, you have Sunni, you have Alawites, you have a lot of things, and they had their system that worked. Bashar al-Assad, is he a tough guy? Yeah. In the Middle East, you got to be a tough guy. But that's his sovereign issue, recognized by the United States, a member of the United Nations. So the U.S., instead of fighting terrorism, fueled on terrorism. All right. The sorties that they flew over illegally, because it was against international law, they destroyed the Syrian state. They weren't fighting and killing terrorists. All right. Then go up to September 2015. Putin comes on television. It's the only time. I've been here for 20 years. It's the only time people were worried, because Russians are war adverse. They still have too many memories of the Second World War. It's in their DNA, okay? And Putin said it's going to limited goals. We're going in there for military, not political, okay? They have, under international law, a state can ask another state for assistance militarily. Assad said, please come and help. The Russians did. Soon after, in a very short amount of time, with very limited, it's how we started this conversation, with very limited resources, turned the tide relatively quickly. And let's stress here, Russia was invited by the legitimate government in Damascus, the United States. And John Kerry got caught on a hot mic saying, well, we can't do that because it's against international law. That's the only time he ever said something like that, because it was a hot mic. He would never say it in a conference, okay? The U.S. knew what it was doing was illegal, okay? But the U.S. does its exceptional stuff all the time. And so the tide of the war was turned. We had Hezbollah in Lebanon assisting as well, and Iran. Russia did the heavy lifting. Hezbollah did the heavy lifting. A lot of logistics and advisory role from Iran, which were there legal too, okay, under international law. And so that's how it turned around. Russia had, and this is really what we need to impress upon. The United States' military is for political objectives. They don't fight wars. They haven't won a war since 1945, okay? The Russian military, if you ask a Russian general, well, what do you think the post-settlement would be for Syria? He'll say, that's not my job. My job is to kill people, okay? And that's what I do. And when the boss tells me I've killed enough, I'm packing up and I'm going home. We have no interest in staying there, okay? That's how Russian generals think and they talk. The boss says, kill those guys, limited resources, get it over. I don't want body bags, and you can get back home, get back in your barracks. That's how the Russian military works, okay? Look at the U.S. Well, ISIS, al-Nusra, they're gone, but we're going to stay anyway. Why? What right do you have to be there? Nobody wants you to there, and then you burn the Kurds. Okay, they don't even want you there now. Okay, it's insanity. All right. So the judo case that we started our conversation with works perfectly for every single example that we've mentioned. With Ukraine, I'm sorry, with Georgia. Okay, limited objectives, and they succeeded in like 8 days.
Right.
All right. Okay. And then you go to Ukraine. Okay. Okay. You have there's no legal government to talk to in Kiev. The people of Crimea won out. It's a geopolitical importance place, the Sevastopol, and we will not let the Donbass fall. All very limited objectives. The Russian army could have taken Kiev in a week. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If the Russian army could fight to liberate the Golan Heights, but then the Russians will say, "What is that? I'm sure that's of interest to Syria. That is of interest to the Israelis." But the Russians say that's none of our business. We're not concerned about that. You have to deal with that. Limited goals, limited resources. Know when to declare victory. Know what victory is. The U.S. never does. How many years? 15 years in Afghanistan. That's insanity.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
Do you think, Peter, that now that you're mentioning the limited goals, and I'm reflecting on a lot of things Trump has said about his geopolitical philosophy, do you see a lot of what Trump says? Do you see a lot of Putin's philosophy in Trump, in that even though Trump has not executed on a lot of it for various reasons, it does seem to me, and I'm taking a stab at it, that Trump that Trump has this limited mindset, this belief that even though the U.S. is vast and full of resources, Trump doesn't seem like the type of person that wants to just, spend thriftily and just, use those resources to no abandon. It does seem that he has that mindset. How do you see that?
If you look at what he's said over the years, he sees these alliances that take advantage of the United States. Okay, of course the arms companies love that. Sure, take advantage of me. But I think he's a real legacy guy, and he really well, obviously thinks a lot of himself, okay? And he saw the indecisiveness of Obama, particularly with Syria, and he was scathing about it. And I think in his mind is that he would like to every single new school and bridge and factory and computer chip to say Trump made this. Okay, that's what he wants. He doesn't give a really hoot about Ukraine. Okay, how do I look good there? How does it? How Trump will be the great new godfather of Ukraine? How's that possible? It's not possible. See, he sees Bush with Iraq. He sees really a very, very weak and ineffectual President Obama, okay? One of probably, in my mind, the worst president of the United States. Okay, maybe the few guys before the Civil War, okay, but Martin Van Buren, he's in the Martin Van Buren category, okay. And I think that Trump, he doesn't have a long-term strategy. He'll look at something and say, well, why are we there? Why are we spending so much money? And what do we get out of it?
Right.
Okay. And last time we talked, I think the review on Afghanistan, he's probably going to give it one more time. And he's going to say, I gave you guys 2 times, 2 bites at the apple. You promised me something would come out of this. And he wants to, he doesn't want he wants to be able to say, I got out of there. Okay. And the other 2 guys before me, well, they made a mess of the place. Why should we stay in a mess? And I think, again, he looks at Japan and he looks at South Korea. I mean, very rich societies. And when I personally think, when he went through all the red states, and he saw these broken down factories and people filling up in stadiums because they're looking for some hope. And then he sees the hinterland of the United States hollowed out, and then he goes, South Korea and Japan, they're doing pretty good here. They got nice airports. Okay, LAX is an embarrassment, a real embarrassment. And he sees I got nice new shiny things. Why can't we have it here? Right. These people are, and anyone that is smart about geopolitics, and the American political class is not smart, is that alliances create unstable in international conflict. They create conflicts. They don't avoid them. Okay, Montenegro. I'm counting on you, guy. I'm counting on Montenegro. No, I'm sure they're nice people. They're tough, apparently, aggressive.
Yeah, there you go.
I love that. I don't know where that came from. But the thing is that he sees, and I absolutely agree with him. It's one of the reasons why I took him seriously during the campaign. I just had Ray McGovern on my program, and he said, Trump's the worst president of all time, but if he wants to have better relations with Russia, I'm on his side. Okay? And so I think that he wants to have, Trump wants to have a lot more room for maneuverability, but his choices of people around him limit that. Okay? And we've talked before, I am very distrustful of Mike Pompeo, of John Bolton, but it's his force of character. I looked at Mike Pompeo's body language and all that in Helsinki. He definitely knows who the boss is in the room.
Right, I agree with that.
And so did Bolton also. Okay,
yeah.
So it would be really nice if the United States had a judo foreign policy. Okay. Because it doesn't. It's like a sumo wrestler,
I was just about going to ask you in closing, if Putin is judo, how would you describe Trump?
Sumo. Which I actually like to watch. It's just so weird. Okay. But I think again, I probably for the 3rd or 4th time, but kind of just end on this. Judo is about patience, looking for your opening and getting one shot. It's like the deer hunter, one shot, and it's very effective for Russia. If you take Russia's border, think of it and look west, Russia can project military power for about 1,500 kilometers. And if you to take the border and do a circle, Syria is just the extent.
Right.
That's it. Russia has it doesn't even have any pretense of projecting military power beyond 1,500 kilometers from its border. It could go to Vladivostok, and you could do the same thing. Okay, but Russia has cut defense spending I mean, now it's at $61 billion a year. I mean, Trump bumped it 71 billion from the 700 already. I mean, there is no comparison here. There's no comparison. The Pentagon has a larger budget than the Kremlin does for everything. That's why Putin is smart. Pick your battles carefully.
Right.
And don't threaten, don't promise, just watch. And that creates people stand back and like, what is he going to do? That's his power. Amazingly. Instead of all the dithering and blabbing on, he doesn't say anything. He says, this is in our interest. It's basically saying, test me. Poroshenko doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think Trump's beginning to pick up on that.
Yeah.
I think he's beginning to pick up on that.
Absolutely. I was about to say Putin originated the don't telegraph your thoughts. Remember, Trump used that throughout his campaign. I'm not going to telegraph my moves. Putin actually does that. He doesn't telegraph his moves.
We'll finish on this, and I think it might surprise a lot of people. Russia, at the end of the day, would like to have good relations with the United States. But the kind of relations the United States wants to have with Russia, Russia cannot accept. And that's the dilemma that we have right now. All right? Because the U.S. and its allies, they bully, they bribe, they use violence, okay, to get what they want. And the Russians say, you can't use any of those with us, but we can negotiate. We can come up with a deal. And it's up to you if you want a deal. If you don't, well, we're dropping the dollar. We're working closer with our Chinese colleagues. We'll have our own Swiss system if necessary. We're the largest food exporter in the world. We are the next with Canada, and Canada is a small player. Russia is the hydro power of the world. Think about that. Food and water. We all talk about nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons don't create safety. They should just be obliterated. They're not necessary. But food and water, everybody needs that. Oh, and on top of it, Russia has a lot of space. Yeah. Okay? That is thinking to the future. That is what the world needs, is resources. And as we speak, where is the Chinese president? He's in Africa. As John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and Trump are kicking up the dust about Iran, who's doing business in the world? The Chinese. Smart.
Yeah.
They're not telegraphing everything they're going to do. They're counting their money and going to the bank. Okay? That's smart.
Yeah. And they say that Russia doesn't make anything. I would say that.
In August, I'm going on to that Crimean bridge. I'm going.
There you go.
Maybe I'll do a live podcast.
That would be great. I bet you our viewers would love to see that. They would love to see that for sure. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk, thank you very much for a great discussion on Putin and his black belt geopolitics strategy. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on that notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. Remember to visit the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt, and help support the Duran. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk, thank you very much. Until next time, take care.